Just hear me out here for a second. Yeah. The evolution of mankind and the fact that it was actually the cell match that made me see, wait, I got to find a different way to connect with people. And you may not want to take credit for this, but when your character just skyrocketed, there were like 6 or 7 like Steve Austin lights, like guys saying, I'm going to, and people, whether they knew it or not, were trying to be like you. And I was a big believer. I'm not gonna be the 7th best Stone Cold. There's an open market there for like the nerd fans, and I need to find a way to make some people laugh to make that connection. So I went in that direction. But going back to the elbow, that was my way of taking the talent that I did have for taking some wild chances and making it work for me as an offensive move.
But a question, and before I ask you the question, when I'm talking about loaded objects, one of my favorites, Mid-South Wrestling, Bill Watts, the loaded Gucci bag. Missy Hyatt would whop Dark Journey with that loaded Gucci bag. I mean, that was one of the damnedest loaded gimmicks of all time, Missy Hyatt's loaded Gucci bag. If you hadn't seen it, go back and Google Mid-South on YouTube. Talking to the legend Mick Foley, we're talking about all kinds of bullshit here today on the show. My question to you is, Mick, when you did that, what do you call it? The fallback?
The Nestea plunge, yeah.
My question for you, Mick, is when you took the Nestea plunge to help preserve that angle so that you didn't have to blow it off that night, and so that it was so, satisfactory, a feeling of accomplishment.
Yeah.
Did you become addicted to that and say, hey, I got to do this more? Because I know you're just talking about moving to the future. You need to use it on the offensive front, but did you become almost a thrill seeker or a pain seeker in wanting to
actually
take the bumps you did?
I was pretty realistic.
Okay, let me ask you this first. How far down the road were you looking in your career? Because I didn't look down the road, man. I was living for the here and the now morning.
Steve, even in Dallas, I gave myself till I was 26. I'd like to think I would have had the strength of character to admit that gig was up. If I was 26, I wasn't making a decent living. Livable apartments, car. Not
were you married
rich.
In Dallas?
No, I wasn't. Okay. I wasn't married. And I would go down to the TV studio in Las Colinas twice a week, and I would watch a video. Bob Von Gursky put the show together, and it's funny if people go back and watch the old World Class show. I would do several of the voiceovers. I produced a couple of the videos. Really? I was pretty hands-on. There was even a time when Bob wanted to take a vacation. They were going to put me in charge of directing the show because I had the background in college. I was always fascinated. I was considered a pain in the neck by some people because I was walking around saying, can you get this camera shot coming from a low, the camera, here's the elbow, and I realize this is my bread and butter. And at that time, it was the 13 to 14 foot, length back when I had a little spring in my legs. Yeah. And even then, there was very little. But I realized.
But you were already looking to the people with the camera to help you look more like a superstar.
So if people go home and they watch that Nestea plunge with Mil Mascaras, it's a hell of a bump. But Jackie Crockett had the perfect camera shot, and as I hit, he shook that camera.
Right.
And like I said, when I got to WWE, there was just a little bit of feeling, when I would walk through, hey, this is what I'm trying to do, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. And now the producers are up there. What are you trying to accomplish? How can we do this? And I hadn't seen my match with the Big Show in the Boiler Room in years. My son Huey is such a fan. I don't, as a habit, go back and watch my old things.
Me neither.
But I remember Kevin remarking he liked the way the knock on me from people who were not Mick Foley guys, for lack of a better word, they're just a big bump guy. But I always wanted there to be a story. And I remember Kevin Dunn really heaping praise on me after that match when I was clearly way past my physical prime and I was just about to go out for some fairly extensive knee surgery. We told a heck of a story, complete with, as I made it to that wall, I made sure, with the palm all bloody, that I had that palm print and smear, like it was going to leave an impression. So I was real big believer in thinking visually way back. I think before most people.
You brought up a name there, Mil Mascaras. There's a story there.
I didn't enjoy working with Mil, and I know Alberto's his nephew. I recognize he's a legend who drew money everywhere that he went, but he wasn't interested in doing business that night.
Story. This was it a pay-per-view?
It was a Clash of the Champions, and
so you're going to work with Mil Mascaras.
I'm going to work with Mil.
What's his beef with you?
No beef, but WCW would sometimes we're not big picture thinkers.
Correct.
We were in Corpus Christi, and the small picture is let's get a pop from the Latino audience. Bigger picture is here's a full-time guy why are we having, he has got some promise, he's a guy we want to use, why are we having him lose on national TV in the Clash to a guy who won't be here ever again? And I was set to, Mill was late, missed his flight, set to wrestle Rick Fargo, actually pick up a victory on Clash of the Champions. And then Mill came in, I'd say 20, 25 minutes before the match. And it was just a series of arm drags. I managed to get that last move. And I just wanted to kick out. And I got caught flack from the powers that be. You were not kicking out under. I wanted that image. And I didn't get it, but what I did have was Jim Ross and Jim Cornette making me look like the superstar that Mill didn't. Like,
right.
As great as JR's, God is my witness, broken in half, not far behind it. And much less heralded was Cactus Jack is dead. Jimmy had that high voice.
Yeah.
It wasn't a perfect TV voice, but you go back, he was quick.
Yeah.
He knew his wrestling. He got people over. And I liked people who put the product before themselves, even if they had a larger than life personality. And there were a lot of guys who spring to mind. Cornette was one of them. Michael Hayes, I thought, was very unheralded as an announcer, as was Kevin Sullivan, who, even though these guys were gimmick guys,
right,
would go out of their way to put the guys in the ring over, which
right,
I try to keep in mind when I had my short stint behind the microphone.
So where did the Cactus Jack gimmick come from?
Cactus Jack was my generic gimmick that I was only going to do long enough to become Dude Love.
Dude, you was born in Indiana. You grew up on Long Island. How in the hell did you come up with Cactus Jack?
Listen, my dad, and I wrote about this in my book, but I love and miss my dad, and I'll take this opportunity to talk about him. My dad had a reputation in our school system as a disciplinarian. The fact that he had a kid who, sometimes did things a little differently was a cause of some concern, because my dad was like such the crew cut. There's no pictures in the Foley family vault of my dad with bell bottoms and pork chop sideburns. He was the crew cut guy. He was the athletic director. And in the book, I talked about how Ward Melville High School was the only high school that didn't allow any taunting or stomping when opponents were taking foul shots, because they would try to do that. And my dad would just look up at that crowd with one glance, and you'd see like 800 people stand down. Cactus Jack was just a name that I came up with for my dad when we were playing the magazine wrestling game. You could send away, you cut something out from the magazine, and then like 3 months later, you got this little board game. And there would be characters that you knew were supposed to emulate WWE, WWF guys. The characters that were supposed to, the Dusty Rhodes character, a very similar name. And then there were some spaces you could fill in your own names. And I was Big Train Foley. That's who I thought I was going to be. And my dad was Cactus Jack.
Yeah.
And so later on, as months passed, and I created this Dude Love persona for myself, which really was a wig, an orange headband, and a pajama top that somehow made me feel cool. I would put it on, I would go out at night, and I would have confidence that I did not have without it. It sounds absolutely ridiculous. But I was smoother, I could talk with women in a way I never could as
Mickey Foley.
Mickey.
So when were you doing the Dude Love?
I was doing it as a home movie that involved the first.
So you were Dude Love some 10, 20 years before you turned into Dude Love.
I was Dude Love
in WWE?
I was Dude Love in 83 and 84. Started wrestling in 85 with the intention of becoming Dude Love when I got good enough to earn that name.
Right.
And then along the way, I realized, Mother Nature's not cooperating. I'm not Dude Love. I am this guy. Cactus Jack on the surface seemed to be like a Western motif, and we kind of turned it into something completely original. The very generic sounding name created a very original concept.
Where did Bang Bang come from?
Bang Bang, man, I love this story. It was just like some of the craziest things, just come out of thin air. It was, if I say, you're going to pop, and people won't see you smile, but if I say the name Nasty Ned Brady, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. He was I never call him job guys. He was an enhancement guy who had the greatest facial features, the greatest facial expressions, kind of like buggy whip arms, He was like me without the love handles, He was like a thinner version from a muscularity standpoint. He's like me without the added body weight. And he sold things magnificently. And at the third or fourth week, I guess, it was November of '89. I'd been turning on my partners for 3, 4, 5 weeks. It was starting to catch on. Like, people were actually looking forward to these tag team contests that I would lose or my partner would lose, and I would then turn on that partner with the elbow, and then put him out 12, 13 feet. Boom, here we go. And I dropped that elbow, and it was a good one on Nasty Ned Brady. And as I lay there, as I sat up, the song Love Shack, B-52s, came into my head. And you can see it on the For All Mankind DVD. I actually say, bang, 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 on the door, baby. I actually sing the lyrics. And that was the last time I sang the lyrics. It was also, I believe, either that night or the next night, the last match I wrestled with front teeth. I was went home, was at a friend's bachelor party, and we got hit head on by a drunk driver, and those teeth were history. And, against my better judgment, I had well-wishers come to the hospital and say, hey, this is good for wrestling. And I'd be, no, that image of the guy with the missing teeth that's long gone, and this is not good. And then when I showed up, I remember Jim Ross going, great look. You got to take what you can. And so I thought, this is a pretty good look. So much so, I've never really gone and replaced them.
Favorite part of you to be? Mick Foley, Do Love, Mankind, Cactus Jack. Did I get them all? What's the difference between all of them?
And I'm talking about WWE. I'm talking about Vince. Specifically, Hunter did a great job of creating the differentiation in people's minds. To some people, they say, forget about the cell match. My favorite moment is when you did the promo where you transformed from Mankind to Cactus Jack, keeping in mind that all I was doing was removing one shirt to reveal another. And the character would have been greatly reduced had Hunter just laughed and given that you're the same guy with a different shirt. Right. And he didn't go that route. He put it over like he was seeing a ghost, like a larger-than-life superhero. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it, And it was one of those, great moments, like a do-or-die moment.
You talk about a lion, son bitch. I thought this whole hour was going to be dedicated about the promo. But we can hammer it for 30 minutes.
Underachiever. I didn't become a good student in college until I started wrestling and had a focus. And then I became a very good college student.
Smart or dumb?
Very smart. I was smart.
I always give you credit for being one of the smartest guys I ever met in the history of business.
Yeah, man.
So what were you majoring in?
Communications major. I was radio and TV, and that really came into.
They teach you the rap there. What do they teach you when you're a radio TV person? Because I wish I would have majored in this.
Man, I was an editing machine. Now I can't edit at all.
But it wasn't on camera stuff. It was behind the scenes.
It was. I would do on cameras too. Okay. I was even when I was a teacher assistant. I was very happy to be on camera. I'm going to appear in the students' projects.
Well, then in your college career or growing up, extrovert, introvert.
I was an introvert who liked to get reactions as a performer.
So then once that camera come on, you're ready to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I thrived on. It was never the competition. It was always about getting the reaction, which is why I'm able to make that really nice segue and get that same feeling of fulfillment from doing my shows that I used to get in the ring. They're different reactions, but I realized, like in '99, as the lighter-hearted Mankind, it took me a while to accept that a laugh could be as valuable as a wince. It took me a while to accept that my job was to send people home happy and not necessarily just concerned or disturbed. But like late 80s, early 90s, I wanted people to be I wanted to strike fear into the hearts of people.
Yeah, so then what was your mindset when you developed that first, as I remember your promos in World Class, that Cactus Jack promo? I mean, it was kind of like, the voice, higher pitched,
right,
intense, hell-bent on a mission, not a deeply layered promo that you would go on to cut in ECW or WWF. So what was the genesis of the promo as far as Cactus Jack speaking to the universe?
Genesis of the promo was just to have something in your mind. And I think that's where the guys today are being underserved by the scripted promo.
And they're being denied the freedom and the ability to have fun and create.
Go ahead. And the necessity and pressure of driving down the road and being driving down the road in character. The promo that suffers is not the one that day that somebody's writing for you, because they might write a heck of a promo for you. The promo that suffers is the promo a month down the line, a year down the line, for the rest of your career, because you're not feeling it. And
or growing.
The guys who do feel it stand out, like a Bray Wyatt, Dean Ambrose. They stand out because I'd be surprised if they're not having a lot of say in the words they speak. But other guys, you can see them trying to recite, and it's not the same. It doesn't mean you can't take someone else's verbiage and make it your own, but I like to be the guy who could respond to anything. Jake Roberts last night, I was privileged to have Jake on the stage during the Q&A, and Jake talked about the days when you do 57 promos for local towns, and you were there when that was, still part of the job description. And you could be the guy who just did the same promo 57 times for different cities. You could be the guy who tried to do something different each time. And so I'll give a lot of credit to DDP. I didn't know when I returned to WCW in 1991 that I was essentially just supposed to be one of these guys who's a progression of guys going to be fed to Sting to try to get, to heat him up a little bit. He'd been logged down with 2 or 3 opponents for quite a while. Nobody told me that was a job description. I was told I was coming in and work with Sting. I thought I was coming in as a top guy. And I didn't know that they had this 6-week run in mind for me. Asleep, so I started counting all the different ways that I could injure Sting. I finally fell asleep at 427. I hadn't even gotten to his legs yet. And Dallas went to Dusty Rhodes and said, you got to come down here and take a look at this guy.
That's great.
If I just had the one promo, all right, Montgomery, boy, I'm gonna teach you a lesson, Montgomery. Well, let me tell you something. I had something in my mind, all the time thinking about these things, so that when I finally did get the chance, it was like release. And I benefited a lot from the frustration I felt, especially over the years, and especially when I got to ECW, and knew what it was like. And I always talk, and I talk about that. I always say me, you, and then I throw Dustin in as well. And I say there was this, this sense of frustration that there was a glass ceiling, and there was Sting up there in that top floor, and there were 3 or 4 other guys knocking and going, we'd like to know what it's like to be up there too. And then I would talk about how, because I didn't have that, I have to gauge how well my career was going by how often I was recognized at the Waffle House. And then it leads into a funny story about encountering, a guy who's taking wrestling way too seriously. But if I didn't have that frustration, and I go out and say you were in the same boat, when I went to ECW, everything had been fine, and I'd been treated the way that I thought I should have, I don't think I could have cut those promos in ECW at a time when I wasn't. Without Mark Merrow, I'm not sure if either you or I would have really made it in WWE, because he was that guy. You talk about a guy who had a target on his back. He came in 3 days after Vince looked at me and said, we don't give guarantees in WWE. We give opportunities. And 3 days later, in comes Mark Merrow with the first ever guaranteed contract. And maybe I was happy to be in WWE, and I was smiling on the outside, but deep down, there was a sense of purpose. And I remember you and I going out as a heel match in 96, early 97, and tearing it down, calling stuff on the spot. We didn't realize why we went 5 minutes over, is because the match was so good. WCW went into a break, and they knew we could carry the ball. But I think the sense that we both had is we're going to show these guys that they picked the wrong guy to give a contract to. And honestly, from an emotionally stable standpoint, I'd like to be able to say I could have cut the same promos if I'd been happy and emotionally healthy. But I was frustrated, I was angry, and I had a way of letting that out in my promo.
The back end of that promo come from when you raised the pitch, because you talk about, and I hadn't even got to his legs yet, because that's when you pitch it up.
Yeah, well, there was a sense of fun in doing it.
What got you down that path of thinking? I mean, was it a movie? I mean, was it anybody's character?